I've been told that there are some autobiographical things I just shouldn't talk about. And to me, that seems all the more reason to talk about those very things. Our lives, to one extent and in some aspect or another, can serve as negative examples to others and, in the telling, perhaps save someone some pain. Usually, the rationale for keeping things close to the vest is that some people, generally scumbags, will use a good overshare against me, or that somehow this will affect my reputation, whatever that might be. However, as we all know by now, the sort of people who have it in for you find it quicker and easier to just make shit up. And if I have any sort of reputation, I hope it's for not actually caring about my reputation, at least not if I have to sacrifice honesty for it. Besides, I reject the heckler's veto. That some people are opportunistic shits, that some people take advantage or treat every bit of evidence as evidence against, really doesn't inform my tendency towards openness. And I am something of an open book to people who know me. They know that I not only tend to wear my heart on my sleeve, but my sometimes brutal honesty often begins with myself. Of course, this can, has, and will get me into trouble when I find myself trusting someone who turns out to be unworthy of my trust. But the alternative, to be closed off, or even worse, to find myself fronting as something I'm not, seems to be the least honest of alternatives. With that honesty and openness often comes reciprocity, in that people know I'm the sort of person they can talk to about things they would never talk to anyone else about. So let's talk about drugs. In the past year or so, I've known people who just started suffering from anxiety, usually expressed in the form of a panic attack, and the quick and easy chemical cure for this is invariably a prescription for a buttload of benzodiazepine, usually Xanax. Benzodiazepines, or benzos, enhance the effectiveness of the neurotransmitter GABA, at the GABA subset A receptor and produces a sedative anti-anxiety effect. Benzos are cross-addictive with alcohol. They affect the receptor in much the same way, which is why people who are detoxing from alcohol are given benzodiazepines and then weaned off them. The first benzo synthesized in 1955 was Librium, which was long-acting, and then Valium, Ativan, and Xanax, each step producing a more powerful, shorter-acting form of the drug. Think of Librium as chewing cocoa leaves, while Xanax, hard-hitting and short-acting, as pretty much crack. Most of the time, people are prescribed benzos as a band-aid for anxiety and are given no indication of what will happen to them when they start taking it, build up a tolerance, and especially what will happen to them when they stop. Sometime in the mid-aughts, with the unraveling of my marriage and the era of my psycho ex-girlfriend, I began having panic attacks. Although panic attacks may start off as generalized anxiety, free-floating, they tend to attach themselves to certain situations and things. In my case, it was the Washington, D.C. Metro. I would get on the train. The chimes would go ding-dong, and a fruity little woman's voice would announce, "Doors closing," and that became my classically conditioned cue to have a panic attack. Panic attack doesn't mean you run up and down yelling, "We're all going to die." In fact, if you look at someone having one, you may not know what was going on inside them, as it's all internal. Despite the feeling of impending doom, of disassociation, of suffocating, most people having a panic attack maintain a practiced stone face, as I did. The way I began thinking of panic attacks is they are what happens to a self-aware, rational animal when nothing is actually trying to chase and eat it. But all that once adaptive fight or flight wiring is still in place. Seems a shame not to use it. And so those alarm bells start going off with little or no prompting. As there's nothing out there to fight or flee from in, say, a metro train, save maybe for those people listening to music on shitty headphones that seem to be entirely bass, all that dread and adrenaline and breathlessness turns inwards. After that, the panic attack that may have been unprompted or free floating becomes associated and conditioned to a particular situation. At which point, trying not to have one is exactly like trying not to think of a pink elephant. The real problem with panic attacks isn't the attacks themselves. They may be wildly uncomfortable, even terrifying, but they are manageable. The real problem is what passes for a cure, which is always a chemical solution to what's really a cognitive problem. Think of it this way. Being innately afraid of snakes is fairly adaptive. And considering John Wayne Gacy and Homie, so is being afraid of clowns. But there's no way dendrophobia, fear of trees, can be at all adaptive. Now, that condition would be treated with cognitive and behavioral therapy, slowly exposing the person to talking about trees, pictures of trees, exposure to actual trees, until eventually they're hugging the damn things like a hippie. No one would think that the solution to that anxiety is to pop a pill when exposed to, or anticipatory to, being exposed to trees. With panic attacks, the cure is worse than the condition. The term here is iatrogenic, a condition caused by the treatment itself. And the idea that depression, anxiety, and other mental states can be cognitive or situational doesn't seem to have really taken hold in the medical profession, let alone your primary care physician. It stands to reason that if your view of a person is broken down into organs and organ groups, balkanized into specialties and subspecialties, where you lose sight of that person, the chance of putting that person into the greater context of their lives is practically non-existent. Besides, simply handing out benzos like a demented Pez head is the simplest solution to a complex problem. For them. Next. They would go into Dachau and start handing out pills for depression and anxiety when the problem people have is, obviously, being in Dachau. People become depressed when they let things go, as in things that need to be done, and anxious when they don't let go of things they should. You could be both an emotional and physical hoarder. And think of how happy those people are on the reality TV show when they're keeping a bag of soda can pull tabs from the 1970s because they think they might need them someday. Now, my first mistake on dealing with the onset of inexplicable and disturbing panic attacks, that was often an obstacle to going from one place to another, was in taking the recommendation to see a doctor for my not yet ex-psycho ex-girlfriend. This doctor was giving her all the Klonopin anyone could want, and following true to form, completely and utterly dosed me on Xanax. That was the last time I ever took anything prescribed, as prescribed, without Googling the living hell out of it. Because you know what they call someone who just barely squeaked through medical school? That's right. Doctor. And if what you fear is the panic attack itself, and start off taking Xanax in maintenance doses, and then you're advised to take it anticipatory of a potential panic attack, and start building up a tolerance, you'll find that the Xanax has removed that feeling of dread and fear in those specific situations, and then removed any other feeling in any other situation, which is what happened to me. What also happened is that, with that much of the stuff sloshing around my brainstem, at one point I passed out, dead to the world, in the middle of a street. Fortunately, it was a side street. That and the pervasive sense of deadening convinced me that I just had enough of this crap. The only thing worse than being rendered stupid on Xanax is not being aware that, after a certain point, you just can't stop taking it. No one, least of all the doctor involved, told me that. Just as the price of a really good drunk is one really bad hangover, the price of masking anxiety with benzos is more than just rebound anxiety. It's a descent into a virtual nightmare. You're a personal Hieronymus Bosch painting, where you're sure the next stage is going to be little beaked figures poking at your ankles with pitchforks and ushering you through the gates of hell. Describing being in the depths of benzodiazepine withdrawal and not knowing that's what's happening to you is almost impossible to describe. You feel as though you're jittering into another dimension. Your extremities are numb and freezing cold. Time stretches out forever. But that's not just it. Cognitively, the world turns to fine-grained ugly. Things are not just ugly, they're made of ugly. Everything and everyone is ugly as they pass by while you shake apart like a rusted out Ford Pinto on 20 miles of rough road. Of all the people I have known who are casually prescribed benzodiazepines to treat anxiety, and especially transient panic attacks, not one of them was informed of the epic suck that is benzodiazepine withdrawal. Now, in the midst of this withdrawal, I managed to get to work. The metro ride had no panic attack with it, but it felt like I was riding the Trans-Siberian Railroad. At my desk, I noted the clock hand had moved after what seemed like an eternity from 9 o'clock to 9:15. And as luck would have it, I managed to get through to a psychopharmacologist who advised me that if I had any of the Xanax laying around, to stick one of those pills under my tongue, which I did. And the world shifted out of the ugly, and the room warmed and brightened, and I could feel the blood flow back into my lips and fingertips. The only treatment for benzo withdrawal is to be put on a long-acting version, like Librium, and slowly weaned off of it, which is what I had to do. Eventually, I stopped having those panic attacks. They were transient, situational, and it seemed the very, very nasty chemical solution to treat it was far worse than the problem. A couple of years ago, one of the young women working in a gym that I then went to confided in me because she had overheard me talking to someone who was being treated, that is, dosed for anxiety. And she told me that she was beginning to have panic attacks. But having gone to the doctor, the solution was at hand. Yeah, he prescribed Xanax for her. I took her aside and explained to her the pitfalls of this solution. Not only was the drug itself potential hell on earth, but by masking the symptoms of a panic attack, all it did was prevent the person taking it from overcoming the fear of fear itself on their own. Now, I wasn't trying to tell her to throw away her medications and accept Jesus, but what I did tell her was to be sparing, and if she could do without, to do without. What's more, I told her something that she later said was the single most useful thing anyone had told her. And that was that no one has ever died of a panic attack. Not only has no one ever died, but the fear of fainting or generally passing out isn't realistic. You faint from low blood pressure, not from what a panic attack does to you. All a panic attack does to you is make you feel as if a tiger just burst out of the underbrush and is making a beeline for you. Except there is no tiger. This young woman, like a lot of other people, eventually transitioned out of whatever was causing the panic attacks. And I'm sure there are people who suffer from pervasive anxiety. But for the most part, it seems self-limiting. Eventually, even a good panic attack can become mundane. I used to rate them on a scale of 1 to 10, and anything less than a 7 was just damn tedious. Now, can someone use that as ammo against me? Sure, I guess they could. I have stories to tell that will be told that are even more so. But I don't care, really. When I know the chances are good that someone listening to this right now has just acquired a little pill bottle of benzos and may be unaware of the waiting world of hurt. After